"Mom, there's fur coming out from under the rug." I don't know how else to describe the sound my heart made when I heard my son yell those words. One second I was scrubbing dried macaroni off the kitchen counter, and the next I was sprinting into the living room, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to entertain. Our golden retriever, Dusty, had been acting strange for 2 days now, and despite our attempts to check him over, he kept retreating to odd corners of the house. I figured it was just the storm the other night. He'd always been skittish during heavy rain. But now? Now my 8-year-old was pointing to a wrinkled corner of the living room rug, like it was a crime scene. "Where's Dusty?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "He's under there. Look, look," Tyler said, his voice wavering between curiosity and worry. I knelt down, peeled back the thick edge of the rug, and that's when I screamed. Not because there was something terrifying, but because I had no idea how he'd managed to wedge himself into such a tight space. His entire body was twisted up beneath the rug, lying between the hardwood floor and the thick padding underneath, like he'd dug his own den. "Dusty, baby, what are you doing?" I whispered, my hands gently running over his back. His fur was warm, but he didn't lift his head. That's what scared me the most. My husband, Mark, was already dialing the vet as I tried to coax Dusty out from beneath the rug. His tail gave one weak thump against the floor, and then nothing. This wasn't like him. He was 10 years old, sure, but even last week he'd chased a squirrel up the fence like he thought he could actually catch it. Mark got us an emergency appointment at Dr. Halver's clinic in town. I rode in the back with Dusty's head on my lap, while Tyler sat in the front, clutching Dusty's favorite tennis ball like it was a lucky charm. The ride was silent, except for Dusty's breathing. Slow. Uneven. Each breath made my chest feel heavier. Dr. Halvers met us in the parking lot. He was already in his scrubs and had the clinic door propped open. We lifted Dusty out of the car together and placed him gently onto the gurney. "He's been hiding and refusing food," I told him, trying to keep my voice steady. "And now this. I don't know what's wrong with him." Dr. Halvers nodded, not saying much, just listening like good vets do. He rolled Dusty into the back as Mark wrapped his arm around my shoulder. I felt Tyler's little hand slip into mine. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and dog shampoo. I could barely sit still. Every time the door creaked or a phone rang, I flinched. After what felt like forever, Dr. Halvers came back, his expression unreadable. "He's stable. Lethargic, but no immediate danger," he began. "We ran blood work and took some x-rays. His vitals are good, but there's something odd." "What is it?" I asked. "He has a foreign object in his stomach. It looks like part of a toy. Maybe a rubber ball or something similar." We all turned to look at Tyler, who turned beet red. He chews them, but I always pick up the pieces, I promise." I squeezed his hand and shook my head. "It's okay, sweetheart. We didn't know. Dusty would need minor surgery, nothing too invasive, but it needed to happen soon." We gave the okay, and a few hours later we were able to see him. Groggy, but awake. When we walked into the recovery room, his tail wagged the tiniest bit, and Tyler burst into tears. The next few days were a blur of medications, follow-up visits, and lots of soft food. Dusty spent most of his time lying by the fireplace, his favorite spot, and I swear I caught Tyler whispering apologies into his ear more than once. What struck me the most was how much we'd all noticed the hole Dusty left in our home during those few days. The quiet was too loud. His absence weighed heavier than I ever imagined. It's easy to take for granted the soft thump of paws across the floor, the jingle of tags when he shook his head, or even the muddy prints he left on the kitchen tiles. One night, I found Tyler asleep beside Dusty, wrapped in a blanket, a book open on his chest. Dusty was curled up close, his head resting on Tyler's side. That was the first night I let myself believe everything would be okay. Still, there were lingering questions, like why Dusty had chosen to hide under the rug. It wasn't like him. He usually preferred burrowing into the laundry pile or curling up behind the recliner. Dr. Halvers said some dogs retreat when they're in pain. It's instinct. But it felt like more than that. It felt like Dusty had been trying to tell us something. A week after the surgery, Dusty was back to his old self. Well, mostly. He was still moving slower, more careful about how he lay down, but his appetite was back, and he followed me from room to room like a shaggy shadow again. It was Tyler who noticed it first, again. "Mom, why's Dusty sniffing the rug again?" I turned from the sink and saw him, nose pressed against the exact spot where we'd found him. He wasn't trying to crawl under this time, just sniffing, pawing gently at the floor. "Maybe he remembers hiding there," I said, drying my hands. But as I walked over, a sudden thought hit me. I knelt and felt around the edge of the rug. Something was off. There was a lump beneath the padding, just a small one. Mark helped me lift the corner, and we pulled the rug back carefully. And there it was, a small red rubber wedge, worn. Dusty's favorite chew toy, or what was left of it. "That's the other half," Tyler gasped. "I couldn't find it. I thought it went under the couch." Dusty sniffed it once and sat down beside us, tail wagging like he'd solved the biggest mystery of the year. We threw it out that night, of course. Every scrap. Then bought new toys, ones he couldn't break apart, ones we triple-checked after every play session. But I couldn't stop thinking about how he'd tried to get back to that spot, how he'd remembered where the pain began, how he'd wanted us to know. Dusty had always been more than just a dog. He was our quiet companion, our furry counselor, the one who knew when to curl up beside you on the worst days. He didn't bark much, didn't demand attention. He just was there. And maybe that's why it hit us all so hard when he wasn't. As spring rolled in and Dusty's energy returned, I started walking him again. Just short loops around the block at first. Tyler came with us, racing ahead on his bike, while Dusty and I kept our own pace. It was on one of those walks that I noticed something new. Dusty paused outside old Mrs. Green's house down the road and refused to budge. He kept looking at her front porch, whining softly. "She's in Florida, remember?" Tyler said. "Her daughter took her." But Dusty didn't stop. He pulled toward the porch like he was trying to get inside. I crouched beside him, running my hand through his fur. "What is it, boy?" He didn't look at me, just kept staring at the house. That was the first clue, the first sign that whatever Dusty had under his nose, it wasn't just a scent. It was something deeper. And we had no idea what he was about to uncover, but we'd find out. Because when a dog you love starts leading you somewhere, you follow, no matter where it takes you. Dusty refused to move from Mrs. Green's porch. It wasn't just a curious sniff or a few lazy paw steps in that direction. No, this was a full stop, like he'd planted himself there on purpose, muscles tensed just enough to keep his legs locked and his body angled toward the house. His ears were perked, and he let out a soft, rhythmic whine that I hadn't heard since the last time he needed to go outside during a thunderstorm. Tyler leaned his bike against the curb and jogged over. "Is he okay?" I reached down and scratched behind Dusty's ears. "I don't know. Maybe he smells something, or remembers something." "But she's not here," Tyler reminded me again. "Mrs. Green left before Christmas." I remembered too. Her daughter had come down from Michigan, packed up the essentials, and taken her to a retirement community. Her arthritis had gotten worse, and the stairs inside the house were too much for her. She'd cried when she left. I remembered that too, I gave the leash a gentle tug. "Come on, boy." Dusty didn't budge. A moment passed, then 2. Finally, he sat. Not in a defeated way, more like he was guarding the spot, just watching, waiting. "Okay, weird," I said aloud, trying to shake off the growing unease. "Let's try again tomorrow." We returned home, but Dusty was restless. He paced near the door, circled his bed twice before ignoring it completely, and then wandered into the hallway where he stared at the wall like it might start talking. That night he tried to crawl under the rug again. Mark and I exchanged looks. Not worried yet, but watchful. "He's been through a lot," Mark said quietly. "Maybe he's not all the way back to normal." "Yeah," I whispered. "Maybe." The next morning, Dusty was waiting by the front door before any of us were dressed. He thumped his tail the second I walked into the kitchen and whined until I grabbed the leash. "Don't tell me," Tyler said, walking in with his cereal bowl. "Back to Mrs. Green's?" I nodded. Sure enough, we barely made it to the edge of her lawn before Dusty trotted up the walkway like he had an appointment. Same spot, same porch, same exact posture. Only this time, there was a new element. Barking. Not loud or frantic, but sharp, short bursts that made me glance at the window. But there was nothing. The curtains inside were still drawn. The house looked the same as always, empty and quiet. Still, Dusty barked. I tried calling him. I tried bribing him with treats. I even tried pretending to walk away without him. None of it worked. "Okay," I muttered. "We'll wait." Tyler sat on the steps, bored within minutes, and started fiddling with pebbles and drawing patterns in the dust. I watched the clouds shift, my hand absently running along Dusty's back. He didn't move, didn't even blink, it seemed. And then we heard it. A thump. From inside the house. Tyler jerked his head up. "Was that—" "Stay back," I said quickly, rising to my feet. I tried the front door. Locked. I knocked, then pressed my ear to the frame. Nothing. Then another thump. Fainter, like something falling, or someone. "I'm calling someone," I said, pulling out my phone. 10 minutes later, Officer Lane pulled up in his patrol car. He was a family friend and had helped us when our shed got broken into last spring. He listened carefully as I explained what we'd heard and glanced at Dusty, who was now sitting like a statue. "Well, dogs know things," he said, stepping up to the door. "Let me try the key the family left with us, just in case." He disappeared around the side of the house and returned with a small brass key. It clicked in the lock. The door creaked open, and instantly Dusty stood. Not barking, not pulling, just alert. We followed Officer Lane inside. It was cold. The thermostat must have been off for months. The living room was coated in a thin film of dust, but everything looked untouched. Same floral couch, same knitting basket by the recliner. And then the smell hit me. It wasn't strong. Yet. But it was wrong. Metallic. Damp. Like something wasn't right. Dusty moved first, padding gently across the hardwood floor, nose low. He led us to the back hallway, the one leading to the sunroom. We found him there. Not a burglar. Not an animal. A man. Unconscious. On the floor, half covered by a coat, with a medical alert bracelet on his wrist. "Holy—" Officer Lane stopped himself and rushed forward. He checked the man's pulse, then pulled out his radio. "Who is he?" I whispered. "Don't know yet." Later we'd find out it was Mrs. Green's nephew. He had a key, had been staying there off the books, helping clean out the attic before the house was to be sold. He'd come down from a ladder and passed out. Low blood sugar, combined with a fall. And no one knew he was there. Except Dusty. After the ambulance came and the man was taken safely to the hospital, Officer Lane shook his head and crouched down to rub Dusty's head. "Well, buddy," he said, "guess we owe you one." Word spread fast. Our little town loved a good dog story, especially one with a hero. The newspaper came by to take a picture. Dusty sat proudly in the grass, tongue lolling, while Tyler posed next to him holding up the leash like he was knighted. Mrs. Green called us from Florida, crying with gratitude, said her nephew was recovering well and had no memory of how long he'd been down there. Doctors said another day, and things could have gone very differently. But Dusty knew. He just knew. After that, we started paying even more attention to Dusty's instincts. Not just where he walked or sniffed, but how he acted around people. If he pulled away, we watched. If he lingered, we asked questions. It was like living with a furry compass that pointed not north, but toward need. A week later, Dusty did it again. This time, it was at the grocery store. We were in the parking lot, Mark grabbing milk, while I waited with Dusty and Tyler in the back of the car. Dusty was staring at the sliding doors, tail twitching. Suddenly, he barked. Loud, insistent, the same bark from Mrs. Green's porch. "What's wrong with him?" Tyler asked, eyes wide. Before I could answer, a woman a few cars down collapsed. Just dropped, like someone had pulled a string. I didn't think. I just ran. Others did too. Thankfully, an off-duty EMT was there and helped immediately. She was diabetic, and her sugar had plummeted. They said it was lucky someone saw her fall so quickly. But Dusty had known before she even fell. That night, Mark sat on the porch with a beer, and Dusty curled up at his feet. "You think he's just lucky?" he asked. "No," I said. "I think he's something else." Mark didn't argue. He just watched our dog stretch out on the wooden slats like he owned the sunset. In the weeks that followed, Dusty went back to being himself. Playful, gentle, loyal. But we watched. We noticed. Because when Dusty focused on something, the world had a habit of shifting to match. He saved lives. Twice. And it didn't feel like coincidence. But as spring faded and summer crept in, Dusty began acting strange again. Not sick, not injured, just quiet, thoughtful. He'd sit at the window longer than usual. He'd pause mid-walk and stare at nothing. He slept closer to Tyler's bed now, like he needed to be near him. One evening, Tyler came downstairs holding something in his hand. "It's Dusty's tag," he said. "It fell off." I took it and flipped it over. The back read, "If lost, please return to Tyler's family." I smiled. I remembered ordering that, but seeing it now made something tighten in my chest. "Can we get him a new one?" Tyler asked. "Of course," I said. I didn't know then why it felt like the right thing to do, but it did. Dusty watched us from the hallway, head tilted, tail slowly wagging. Something was coming. None of us knew what it was yet. But Dusty did. And once again he was trying to prepare us the only way he knew how, by being there, by leading us, by watching and waiting. Because there was more to the story, and Dusty was just getting started. I never thought a dog could pace like a man with something on his mind, but that's exactly what Dusty was doing. For nearly 3 days, he moved from room to room like he was searching for something. Except he never sniffed, never barked, never scratched. He just walked, occasionally pausing in doorways to stare down hallways as if expecting someone to arrive. His steps were slow and careful, not from pain or fatigue, but something closer to caution. Tyler noticed it too. "Do you think he's trying to tell us something again?" he asked, sitting on the floor with his knees pulled to his chest, watching Dusty make his 4th lap through the living room. I nodded slowly. "I do, but I don't know what." Dusty paused at the front door and sat down. Not begging to be let out, just sitting, like he was waiting for the world to shift again. Mark walked in from the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. "Is it happening again?" "Feels like it," I said. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "All right then. I'll call around. Maybe someone's seen or heard something. It can't hurt." He was half joking, but by now we all knew Dusty didn't do anything without a reason. By that evening, Mark had talked to 5 neighbors, a guy from his softball league, and even Mrs. Green's daughter. Nothing out of the ordinary. But Dusty hadn't moved from the door. He didn't sleep in his usual spot. He didn't touch his dinner. Tyler set his plate down and whispered, "It's happening again. He's going to find someone, isn't he?" I crouched next to Dusty, brushing my hand along his thick fur. "Is that what you want, boy? You want to show us something?" He looked at me, brown eyes calm but steady. "Then let's go." Mark met us on the porch, keys already in hand. "If we're doing this, we'll need to follow him on foot. Can't drive blind." The evening was warm, but not sticky. The sun hung low, casting golden shadows across the lawns. Dusty trotted ahead with a sense of purpose. He wasn't running, just leading, like he had a destination already mapped out in his head. He didn't go toward town. He didn't go to Mrs. Green's. He led us in the opposite direction, past the community pool, across the little footbridge near the school, and into the edge of the woods behind Miller's farm. Tyler had to jog to keep up. "Are we allowed back here?" he asked, a little breathless. Mark glanced around. "Technically, no. But let's just keep going. We'll deal with it if someone says something." Dusty stopped at a patch of wild grass and nosed the air. Then he darted to the left, deeper into the trees. We followed without a word. The further in we went, the quieter everything felt. Birds still chirped, sure, but the stillness under the canopy had a hushed weight to it. Dusty rounded a thicket and came to an abrupt stop. I nearly collided with Mark when we all stopped behind him. There, just ahead, was a small, abandoned shed. Metal roof, paint peeling. I remembered seeing it years ago, back when the boys used to ride bikes through the field before the trees got too thick. Everyone said it had belonged to the old farmer who lived there before the Millers bought the land. Dusty crept forward slowly, then sat. We approached carefully. I placed my hand on the rusted doorknob. It gave easily, and the door swung open with a soft groan. The smell hit us first, stale, damp, but nothing rotten, just old. The inside was dusty, with broken tools leaning in the corners and empty crates stacked against the wall. And in the middle of the floor, curled into a pile of old blankets, was a dog, a small beagle, shaking. "Oh my," I started, but Tyler moved past me. "It's a puppy," he whispered. Not quite. It was a young dog, but not a puppy. Maybe a year old. Thin, ribs showing. Big eyes locked on Dusty like he was the first thing in the world that made sense. Dusty stepped inside and lay down just a few feet away from the beagle. No growl, no bark, just calm. I knelt slowly, inching forward. "Hey, sweetheart. You okay?" The beagle didn't move. Mark crouched beside me. "Got a collar." He reached forward gently and slipped a few fingers under the fabric. No tags, "Do you think someone left him here?" Tyler asked. I shook my head. "I don't know, but he needs help." Dusty gave a low, soft huff. We took the beagle home that night. He didn't resist, didn't squirm, just allowed us to carry him to the car and lay him on a towel. At home, Dusty lay beside him like a guardian angel. We named him Jasper. The vet said he was dehydrated but otherwise healthy. No broken bones, no sign of injury, just hungry, just scared. "He might have run off and gotten lost," Dr. Halvers said. "Or he might have been dumped." That last part sat heavy in my gut. We posted online, called shelters, asked around. No one came forward. Days turned into a week. Jasper slowly came out of his shell. He followed Dusty like a little brother, watched how he ate when he went out, even how he played. And Dusty, he let it happen. Guided him, protected him. "He found him for a reason," Mark said one night. "Didn't he?" I nodded. "I think so." There was a lightness in the house with Jasper there. Tyler was in heaven, and even our cat, Lulu, seemed intrigued. But the one most affected was Dusty. He perked up. His steps had more energy. His eyes gleamed a little brighter. It was like finding Jasper had given him a new job, a new spark. We'd thought Dusty was growing tired, maybe slowing down for good. But now, he was leading again, laughing in his own dog way, tongue out, tail wagging, nudging Jasper with playful growls. But then came the night of the storm. Thunder cracked hard just after midnight. Rain pounded the roof like fists. The house trembled with each gust of wind, and Dusty was nowhere to be found. We searched every room, checked closets, bathrooms, underbeds. Nothing. Panic surged in my chest. Then Tyler's voice called from the back door. "He's outside!" We ran to the porch, and there was Dusty, standing at the edge of the yard, staring into the woods. "Dusty!" I shouted. "Come back!" But he didn't. He turned and bolted into the trees. "Mark!" "I'm on it!" he shouted, already pulling on his jacket. We chased after him with flashlights, the storm blinding us every few seconds. Mud clung to our shoes, branches slapped our faces, but we didn't stop. Dusty was leading us again. He ran fast this time, like whatever he'd found couldn't wait. Through the woods, past the shed where we'd found Jasper, deeper than we'd ever gone before. And then we heard it. Crying. Soft. Human. "Do you hear that?" Mark shouted. "Yes." Dusty led us to a clearing where a girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, was huddled against a fallen tree, soaked to the bone, face streaked with mud and tears. She didn't scream when she saw us. She just clung to Dusty as he nosed her gently. We wrapped her in Mark's jacket, called 911. She'd wandered from a campground nearly 2 miles away, gotten lost after chasing a butterfly during a hike with her family. Search parties had been looking all evening. The storm had made it harder. But Dusty found her. The paramedics said we got to her just in time. The cold had already started to set in. Another hour? Maybe 2? It wouldn't have ended the same way. Back home, Tyler wrapped Dusty in a towel and hugged him like he'd never let go. "You saved her," he whispered. Dusty leaned into him, eyes soft. We all sat there, soaked, exhausted, silent. Jasper curled up next to Dusty, letting out a tiny, tired sigh. Whatever Dusty had been sensing, whatever had stirred him, he'd answered the call. Again. And something told me he wasn't done yet. Not even close. The morning after the storm, Dusty slept longer than usual. Not that anyone blamed him. After all, he'd led us through a lightning-filled forest to find a missing girl. But it wasn't just exhaustion that kept him curled up near the fireplace. It was something else, something quieter. He was still. Not weak, not sick, just still. As if whatever had driven him the night before had burned through him like a candle flickering low. Tyler knelt beside him and gently ran his hand along Dusty's back. "Is he going to be okay?" I poured warm water into his bowl, just the way he liked it after rough nights. "He's okay, bud. He just needs rest, like anyone else after a big job." Tyler nodded, but didn't move. He just kept petting him, one slow stroke after another. Mark stepped into the room, holding the morning newspaper. He looked from Dusty to me, then handed me the front page. The headline read, "Golden Retriever leads family to missing child." There was a grainy picture of Dusty, soaking wet from the storm, standing next to the little girl as paramedics wrapped her in a blanket. She was smiling, eyes locked on Dusty like he was the sun. "He's a local hero now," Mark said. "He's been a hero for a long time," I replied. By that afternoon, the doorbell started ringing. Neighbors, strangers, folks from the next county over. Everyone wanted to meet Dusty. They brought treats, toys, thank you cards. Someone even dropped off a giant canvas painting of him, complete with a tiny Jasper curled beside him. Dusty took it all in stride. He accepted pets and attention, tail wagging gently, eyes kind. But he never left Tyler's side. Not for long. Wherever Tyler went, be it the kitchen, the backyard, even the bathroom, Dusty followed like a silent protector. Jasper followed Dusty. Our house, once relatively quiet, now felt like a crossroads. People came and went. Reporters asked for interviews. A woman from the local dog rescue begged to use Dusty's story to help promote pet adoptions. We agreed, of course. Anything that helped more dogs like Dusty and Jasper find homes. But amid the flurry, Dusty's eyes remained watchful. He wasn't finished. One evening, after the visits tapered off, we sat on the back porch, just the four of us. Dusty rested on the steps while Jasper chewed a toy nearby. The sky glowed purple and orange, the kind of sunset that made you forget anything bad ever happened. "I think Dusty's like a superhero," Tyler said. "But instead of flying or shooting lasers, he just knows." Mark chuckled. "He's got instincts, smarter than all of us put together." "He's got heart," I said. "That's his superpower." As if on cue, Dusty stood up and walked to the edge of the yard. He didn't bark or whine. He just stared through the fence slats toward the street. "Something else?" Mark asked. I followed Dusty's gaze. A car idled at the corner. Not parked, just sitting. Engine running. The windows were tinted and the plates weren't local. I felt a prickle run down my spine. Tyler moved closer to Dusty, resting a hand on his back. "What's he looking at?" The car slowly pulled away after a minute, vanishing down the road without turning. "Maybe just someone lost," Mark said, but I saw the same tension in his jaw that I felt in my chest. Dusty didn't move until the taillights were gone. Then he sat down and looked at us. Like always, we paid attention. That night, Dusty didn't sleep in his bed. He slept beside Tyler's door, and he did the same thing the next night. And the one after that. It was a full week before we saw the car again. This time it came in the middle of the day. Same dark windows, same slow crawl down the block. But now it parked across the street. The driver didn't get out. I pulled the curtain aside just enough to peek. Dusty stood by the window, silent, his body tense. Mark stepped behind me. "We need to call that in." So we did. Officer Lane showed up 10 minutes later. The car was gone by then, but we gave him the plate number and everything we'd seen. He promised to look into it. That night, Dusty didn't even pretend to rest. He sat at the door, ears perked, ready. Jasper tried to get him to come play, but Dusty stayed put. Watching. Waiting. Tyler brought him water, laid a blanket beside him, then sat with him in silence. The next morning, we woke to find tire marks on the edge of our lawn. No damage, no broken fence. But clear as day, someone had pulled up, sat for a while, and then left. Dusty sniffed the ground, then paced the yard, tail low, steps measured. We installed security cameras that afternoon. By evening, Dusty finally settled down again, just for a while. He curled up next to Jasper and let himself rest, and that's when the letter came. No return address, just our names, typed neatly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature. Just a short typed message. "You shouldn't have taken what wasn't yours." I read it 3 times before handing it to Mark. My throat felt dry. "What does that even mean?" he muttered. Jasper barked softly. Dusty stood, his eyes locked on the window again. Someone had left that letter, someone who didn't want to be seen, and we had a very good idea what it was about. Jasper. That night, Tyler came into our room, clutching his pillow. "Can I sleep here?" he asked. "Of course," I said. "Bad dream?" He nodded, but I saw the truth in his eyes. He was scared. Just like us. Dusty took his usual place near the door. At midnight, our motion sensor light went on. Mark was out of bed in an instant, bat in hand. I checked the camera feed. Someone had walked up our driveway. Hood up. Face turned away. Dusty growled. The person didn't knock, didn't leave another note. They just stood there. Still. Then walked away. We sent the footage to the police. They couldn't identify the figure. Too blurry, no clear facial recognition, but they promised more patrols in the area. That didn't stop Dusty from guarding the yard like it was his personal mission. And then, as if nothing happened, everything stopped. No car, no letters, no motion lights. For 2 weeks, it was quiet again. But Dusty didn't let his guard down. We knew better than to ignore him. One afternoon, Tyler came running from the backyard. "Dusty's barking like crazy. He won't stop." I dropped my laundry basket and ran outside. Dusty was at the far end of the fence, teeth bared, tail stiff. Jasper stood behind him, tense but silent. I followed Dusty's gaze. There was something tucked between the bushes. I squinted, then moved closer. It was a crate, a dog crate. And inside, barely moving, was a black and white terrier. I opened the gate and approached carefully. Dusty stood beside me, growling low. The crate was unlocked. No food, no water. Just a small blanket and a terrified dog with wide eyes. Another one. Another abandoned soul. We brought him in, cleaned him up, named him Pepper. He didn't bark, didn't whimper, just followed Dusty like a shadow. Jasper accepted him without hesitation. Dusty, once again, had known, and I couldn't help but wonder, how many more? What else did Dusty know that we didn't? And how long had he been carrying the weight of it on his own, just waiting for us to catch up? Pepper barely made a sound for the first 2 days. He followed Dusty everywhere like a second shadow, never straying more than a few feet away. Jasper, now fully settled into our home, watched the new arrival with the calmness of someone who'd been through it already. He didn't bark or crowd Pepper, just made space. That was Dusty's influence. Gentle leadership, never forced, always felt. Tyler took to Pepper immediately. He'd lie down on the floor and read out loud while Pepper curled up near his feet, still wary, but not trembling anymore. Each time Tyler reached a quiet pause, Dusty would walk over, sniff Pepper gently, and sit beside him. A small sign, but one that told us everything was going to be all right. We reported the crate to Officer Lane. He came by in plain clothes this time, probably hoping not to alarm the neighborhood more than it already had been. He looked at the crate, inspected the area where we'd found it, and shook his head. "This was deliberate," he said. "It wasn't just someone abandoning a dog. This was a message." "About Jasper?" Mark asked. "Possibly. Or it could be someone using that situation as an excuse. Either way, it's a problem." He promised increased patrols again and encouraged us to install an additional motion sensor at the back gate. We did that same afternoon, but the more time passed, the more it became clear this wasn't just about one dog, or even three. Something bigger was stirring, something that Dusty could feel, even if the rest of us were still catching up. That weekend, we took all 3 dogs to the park. We chose early morning, before the crowds. The open space, the fresh grass, the clear sky. It felt like something close to peace. Dusty ran first, his body still strong but more measured. Jasper raced after him with boundless energy, while Pepper hesitated before finally trotting a few yards out, tail tucked but not hidden. Tyler cheered from the bench. "Go, Pepper! Go, Jasper!" Dusty turned and barked once, short and sharp, and the others stopped in their tracks. He stood like a sentinel, ears twitching, gaze focused toward the far side of the park. I followed his stare. A man stood at the edge of the trees, dressed too heavily for the warm day. He wasn't watching the scenery. He was watching us. Dusty growled. The man didn't move, didn't wave, just turned slowly and walked into the woods. "Did you see that?" I asked Mark. "Yeah," he said, already on his feet. "Stay here." He didn't go far, just to the tree line, but the man was gone. Vanished between the trunks like he'd never been there at all. We cut the visit short after that. Dusty stayed close to Tyler the entire walk home. The next day, a letter arrived. Typed. No return address again. This time it read, "3 is too many. Put them back." Tyler wasn't allowed to see that one. We threw it away and called Officer Lane again. He came by quietly that evening. "This is escalating," he said. "I don't think this is about the dogs themselves. I think it's about you helping them." "What kind of person gets angry about that?" I asked. "The kind who's losing control of something and doesn't like people interfering." He left with the letter. We doubled the locks that night. Dusty began sleeping by the front door again, but this time he rotated. One night at the front, one at the back, then the side hall. He moved like he was anticipating entry points. I started leaving water bowls at each station. Jasper began copying him. Pepper followed them both. One morning, Tyler woke up and found Dusty standing in the hallway, ears up, tail low, staring out the front window. "What is it, boy?" Tyler whispered. Dusty turned and walked to the garage door. That's when we found the footprints. Not paw prints, boots, muddy. One pair. They circled our garage door and led off toward the woods. No damage, no break-in, just a message. Dusty led us to the exact spot they stopped. Nothing was there. No crate, no dog. But the air felt heavy, like someone had just been there. We reported it, again. Officer Lane looked more frustrated than ever. "You're being targeted. I'm convinced now." "Why?" Mark asked. "Why our dog? Our family?" "Because someone out there has been doing something for a long time, and now that you're interfering, by saving the dogs, by paying attention, they've got a problem." We didn't say it, but we all felt it. There had to be more. More dogs, more crates, more stories that never got told because no one was looking. Except Dusty. We started watching the edges of our town differently, not just for strangers, but for signs, overgrown lots, empty properties, trailheads with no activity. Dusty led us on long walks through parts of the neighborhood we'd never explored. And then one day, he pulled toward an abandoned barn a few miles out, near a rarely used hiking trail. Mark and I exchanged a glance. He nodded, and we followed. The barn door was chained, but not locked. Dusty paced in circles outside it, whining. We pried it open just enough to slide through. The smell was immediate, strong, musky. Not decay, but animal. Inside were 3 crates, empty bowls, torn blankets. No dogs, but someone had been keeping them there. Recently. We took pictures, then called it in. Lane came fast this time, with 2 other officers and an animal control van in tow. "This is what I was afraid of," he said. "A holding site. Temporary. They move them before anyone gets close." We helped collect what evidence we could, and Lane promised to start tracking rural property rentals and temporary utility usage. It was a long shot, but it was something. Dusty stood beside the barn door, watching the horizon, like he knew they'd just missed something, but not for long. The next week brought another dog. This time she came to us. She appeared on the porch just before dawn, a pit mix, limping, covered in scratches, no collar. Dusty whined when he saw her, then licked her ear gently. She didn't fight, didn't flinch. Tyler named her Maple. We patched her up, fed her, cleaned her wounds. She didn't leave. And Dusty? He watched the door every night after that. He waited. And we waited with him. Because by now we knew he wasn't just guarding a home. He was building something. A place where the lost came to be found. And that meant more were coming. Whoever was out there, whoever wanted to stop him, had no idea what kind of dog they were dealing with, and no idea what kind of family stood behind him. The porch had become a symbol of something we never planned for. Most houses had a welcome mat and a porch light. Ours had that too, but it also had a bed of towels in one corner, a small stack of folded blankets, a large water bowl, and an aluminum food dish we cleaned out every evening. We kept it full. Always. Not because we had a new routine, but because Dusty told us to. He didn't tell us in words. He told us in the way he'd walk to the front door every night around 9, nose the lock, and let out a low woof if we forgot to check the porch one last time. He told us when he stood motionless at the window until Mark or I pulled back the curtain. He told us when he gave Jasper and Pepper a look that somehow meant, "Stay back. I'll handle this." The night Maple showed up had changed something. Not just in Dusty, but in all of us. It wasn't a coincidence. These dogs weren't strays stumbling into our yard. They were being sent, or escaping. And somehow Dusty was the one they trusted to find. The community had begun to take notice. After Dusty's story went viral, local shelters called to ask for help. Not to dump animals, but to find out how they could better track missing dogs, how to support rescues. Tyler even started an online page called Dusty's Porch. He posted photos and updates, and by the end of the week, we had over 5,000 followers. But the messages started too. Some anonymous, some from burner accounts, all in the same tone. You think you're saving them? You're interfering. Keep taking what's not yours and find out. We turned the messages over to Officer Lane. He didn't say much at first, just took screenshots and wrote notes. But then, one afternoon, he called and asked us to meet him at the station. He waited until the door closed behind us before speaking. Something's going on, he said. We've seen an uptick in abandoned animals all across the county, especially in the last 3 months. Not just your house, farms, hiking trails, even in front of businesses that aren't open yet. But here's the thing. Most of them don't match any missing pet reports. No chips, no tags. It's like they were never registered anywhere. Breeding? Mark asked. Possibly, Lane said, but not necessarily the usual kind. We think it's more selective. He flipped through a folder. Purebred mixes, trainable breeds. Several show signs of early socialization and crate training. They're not random street dogs. These animals were raised with a purpose. A purpose. The word sat in my chest like a stone. What kind of purpose? I asked. He hesitated. We don't know yet. Back home, Dusty was waiting at the top of the stairs, flanked by Jasper, Pepper, and Maple. They watched us walk in like they already knew what we'd heard. That evening, Dusty paced the hallway for a full hour before stopping at Tyler's bedroom. He nudged the door open and walked inside. Tyler was on the floor, surrounded by homework. Hey, boy, he said, scratching Dusty's chin. You want to hang out? Dusty didn't lie down. He stood by the window and stared into the yard. That night, the porch camera caught a flicker of movement at 2:13 a.m. A figure in a hoodie. Thin. Fast. They ran past the porch without pausing. No crate, no dog, just running. Dusty didn't bark. He watched, then turned to the door and lay down. At sunrise, a dog showed up. This one was different. A boxer, older, limping on one leg and with deep scars around his midsection like he'd been tied too tight for too long. Dusty didn't greet him. He walked straight to the gate, sniffed once, then looked at us. We opened the door. The boxer didn't flinch. He limped through like he knew this place, knew it from memory or scent or something deeper. He stopped just short of the porch and lay down with a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere ancient. Tyler named him Diesel. Diesel didn't follow the others. He slept a lot, ate slowly, moved with pain in his joints and quietness in his eyes. But Dusty stayed with him more than any of the others. Sometimes I'd find them lying in the grass, side by side, Dusty watching the sky while Diesel just breathed. Mark came home from work one day and handed me a newspaper clipping. Read this, he said. It was from a town 4 counties over. Headline, Dog fighting ring busted on rural property. 7 arrests. Dozens of dogs rescued. Most of the animals are being held in shelters, Mark said, but a few are missing. Runaways? I asked. Or intentionally released? He showed me a grainy photo taken during the raid. In the background, barely visible through a chain-link fence, was a boxer with a crooked tail and a scarred leg. Diesel. We submitted the photo to Officer Lane. Within 24 hours, he confirmed it. Diesel had escaped. No one knew how. He'd been missing for 12 days. And he made it to us. because Dusty had known he was coming. We didn't ask questions anymore. When Dusty stood by the door, we followed. When he circled the porch 3 times before lying down, we let him. When he sat in the driveway facing the woods, we sat with him. Because the pattern was clear. Dusty wasn't just sensing danger or distress. He was guiding something. A network we couldn't see. A movement we didn't understand. A rescue line, invisible to us but visible to him. Tyler's website gained more traction. We started receiving messages from people wanting to donate supplies. Others asked how they could help. One woman, a retiree from Oregon, sent us handmade dog blankets with each dog's name embroidered in the corner. Dusty's corner of the porch became a shrine. Kids left chalk drawings. Someone planted flowers nearby. A neighbor built a small bench and engraved it with the words, "For the ones who came home." And still, the dogs came. Not every day, sometimes a week would go by. But then Dusty would rise from his bed, walk to the porch, and wait, and someone would arrive. A shepherd mix, a spaniel with cropped ears, a retriever missing one eye. And always, Dusty was first to greet them. We learned how to listen, how to read his posture, how to tell the difference between a growl of warning and one of pain. Jasper matured. Pepper found her voice. Maple guarded the gate like a soldier. And Diesel, old as he was, began to sleep more peacefully. Sometimes I'd watch Dusty sleep, his paws twitching like he was running in dreams. I wondered what he saw, what he heard, what he felt before the rest of us caught up. He wasn't just our dog anymore. He was something more. Not a prophet, not a saint, but a keeper, a quiet sentinel between one world and another. And the line between them was thinner than we'd ever realized, which made what happened next even harder. Because one night, Dusty didn't come inside. He sat by the gate until sunrise, and when we brought him water, he didn't drink. He looked up at me, eyes steady, then turned to the woods. Something was coming. And this time, it wasn't a dog. It started with a howl. Not Dusty's. This was something else. Far off, somewhere deep in the woods, long and low, like it was being dragged out of the trees, one breath at a time. I'd never heard anything like it, and neither had Dusty. He stood at the gate, ears forward, tail stiff, his body coiled like a spring. Mark stepped outside behind me, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Is that a coyote?" "No," I said, and even I wasn't sure how I knew. "That's not a coyote." The dogs inside stirred. Jasper let out a short bark. Pepper began pacing by the back door, nails clicking on tile. Even Diesel, who barely moved these days, stood up on aching legs and shuffled toward the sound. It came again. Closer this time. I reached for my phone, checking the time. 4:07 a.m. Dusty didn't move from the gate. He didn't growl, didn't bark. But something in his stance said he was bracing himself. Mark whispered, "We need to bring him in. He won't come. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Dusty didn't budge even when Mark walked down the steps and gently called his name. His eyes were locked on the woods, focused and calm, in a way that unnerved me. Not afraid, not angry, just ready. I turned on the porch light. The yard lit up in a yellow wash, throwing long shadows across the grass. And then we saw them. Eyes. A pair of glowing eyes just past the tree line. Not reflective like a deer's or sharp like a raccoon's. These were different. Flat, unreadable, but fixed directly on us. Dusty took a step forward. "Dusty, no," I whispered. But he didn't go. He stopped, and after a few seconds, the eyes disappeared, blinked out like someone had flicked off a switch. No sound, no footsteps, just gone. That's when Dusty turned around and came inside. We didn't sleep after that. The next morning, Dusty stayed by the front window. The others huddled together more than usual. Tyler, already dressed for school, came down and sat on the rug between them, crisscross applesauce, holding Maple's head in his lap. "Are we safe?" he asked. I didn't lie. "I think so. Because we have him." Dusty stood and walked over to Tyler, pressed his nose into his shoulder, then returned to the window. At school drop-off, I parked instead of using the circle. I walked Tyler to the door. "Mom," he said, pausing, "you don't think those people are going to try something again, do you?" I crouched down and looked him in the eyes. "I don't think anything will happen without Dusty knowing about it first." He nodded. "I believe that." So did I. We spent the next 2 days watching the woods. Nothing came. No more eyes. No more howls. But then the notes started again. First one, tucked under the windshield wiper of Mark's truck at the grocery store. Then another, slid between the storm door and the frame while we were in the backyard. "Stop opening the gate. This isn't yours to fix. You don't know what you're keeping." Dusty didn't act out. He didn't charge the fence, but his watchfulness changed. He began patrolling the entire perimeter, slow and deliberate. Jasper stayed close behind. Pepper started barking at shadows. Maple stopped sleeping near the fireplace and took up a spot just under the dining room table where she could see the front and back doors at once. Diesel, too stiff to move much, stayed by Tyler's bed. Every night, we tightened everything. Upgraded cameras, new locks, motion lights at the back fence. But Dusty wasn't just reacting. He was preparing. I found him one afternoon lying under the lilac bush, nose toward the woods. I brought him water. He didn't drink, just looked up at me like he was waiting for me to catch up to something he already knew. "What is it, boy?" I asked. "What are we missing?" He didn't blink. Just got up and started walking. He led me past the gate, down the side yard, across the street, and onto the path that bordered the woods. The same path we took when we first found Jasper. The same path we used to avoid when Dusty started standing guard. Now he was leading me back in. We walked a 1/4 mile before he stopped. There was something there, half buried in leaves, hidden between roots. I crouched down and brushed the dirt away. A collar, red nylon, frayed at the edges. I turned it over. No tags. But it wasn't just a collar. It was connected to a thin chain. One end snapped, the other rusted into the dirt. Dusty growled, not at the collar, but at the woods beyond it. "Someone left them here," I said aloud. "They were tied." Dusty took one step forward, then another. Then he sat. I picked up the chain, coiled it carefully, and put it in my jacket. When we returned, I called Officer Lane. He came over right away, studied the collar, the chain, then said, "You might want to sit down." We all gathered in the kitchen. Mark, Tyler, me, and Lane. "I didn't want to tell you before we were sure," he said, "but some of the dogs you've found, especially Jasper, Diesel, and Maple, match descriptions from a missing dog report out of state. Not pets, not rescues." "Then what?" Mark asked. "Military." I froze. "What kind of military?" "Private security firm. Contracts out dog units for overseas and domestic jobs. Protection. Tracking. Even aggression training. Some of these animals were never intended to be pets. Tyler looked confused. You mean, like war dogs? Something like that, Lane said. Except there's no oversight, no government database, no accountability. When one gets injured or fails training, they're often disposed of. They were going to kill them, I said. Lane nodded. Or worse, use them in less regulated markets. Fighting? Mark asked. And other things, Lane confirmed. I looked at Dusty, lying calmly at the back door. He'd known. He'd known all along. Lane took the chain and collar for evidence. I don't know how they're finding you, he said. But I do know one thing. You've got their attention, and they're not happy about it. That night, Dusty didn't sleep. He paced. He checked every window. And at 3:21 a.m., the back motion light flared. I checked the camera. A figure, hooded, crouched by the gate. Dusty lunged at the door and barked so loud it shook the windows. The figure ran. Dusty didn't stop barking until the sun came up. The next day, we installed a second fence. A week passed. No more visits, no more notes, just quiet. Then another dog, smaller this time, a border collie mix, skittish but fast. She showed up at sunrise, ran 3 circles around the porch, then bolted toward the gate. Dusty stopped her gently, nose to nose, then led her inside. We named her Echo. She had scars under her fur, faint burns along her paws, terrified of sudden sounds. But she followed Dusty like a shadow. They all did. Tyler started sleeping with the door open so Diesel could come and go. Pepper stood guard at the stairs. Jasper sat by the fireplace again, only now facing outward, not in. And Dusty? He watched the woods. He waited, because something was coming again. And we still had more dogs to meet, more lives to hold on to. And whatever was out there, whatever shadow Dusty had seen in the trees that night, it hadn't given up. But neither had he. 3 days after Echo arrived, Dusty began digging. Not frantically, not like a dog after a mole or bored with his backyard. He dug with purpose, carefully, slowly, one paw at a time, and always in the same place, by the big tree in the far right corner of the yard, just outside the reach of the porch light. It wasn't the first time we'd seen him do it. He'd pawed at soil before, scraped at the edge of flower beds or under the lilac bush, but never like this. This time, it was deliberate. He stopped only when Tyler came out with his homework tucked under one arm and a plastic bowl of cereal in the other. "Dusty," Tyler said, crouching beside him. "What's down there?" Dusty looked up, then nudged the loose dirt with his nose. Mark and I watched from the back door. It was early evening, sun setting, sky painted the kind of orange that feels borrowed. I stepped outside and called out, "What's going on?" "Dusty's digging something up," Tyler said. "He wants us to look." I grabbed a flashlight just in case, even though there was still plenty of light left. By the time I reached them, Dusty had unearthed the top of a plastic container. One of those heavy-duty storage bins with a sealed lid, the kind you'd keep camping gear or old clothes in. "Help me lift it," I said. Mark joined me. Together we pulled the bin out of the shallow hole. Dusty stepped back and sat, tail twitching. It wasn't locked, just clipped shut. Mark opened it slowly. Inside were papers. Lots of them. Folded folders, laminated forms, and 3 Ziploc bags filled with flash drives and SD cards. "What the—" Tyler leaned in. "Is that school stuff?" "No," I said softly, lifting one file. It was labeled in thick black ink. Unit K9 BL Series. Evaluation Logs, Confidential. We opened another. This one had a photo inside. A German shepherd mid-leap, teeth bared, lunging toward a suited man. The caption below said, K9 Beta Unit 17. Field Test 4C. Status, failed. Note, remove from active rotation. Dusty growled, not loud, just enough to let us know he remembered. Where did this come from? Mark asked, voice tight. No idea, I said, but Dusty wanted us to find it. We called Officer Lane. He arrived within 30 minutes, didn't say a word when he saw the bin. He took one look at the label on the top folder and said, We're in it now. He took the bin into his squad car and told us to stay alert. We already were. Later that night, Dusty stood at the gate again, watching the woods. This time Diesel joined him, side by side, like soldiers. Something had changed. Lane called the next day. Those files match a series of reports we've been following for over a year, he said. Illegal breeding programs, supposed training facilities, but no formal charges ever stick. They always disappear before we get there. What's on the drives? I asked. We're still combing through them. Most are encrypted, but we did unlock one. Footage. Of what? Dogs. In cages, being tested, loud noises, isolation. Some are being trained to track, some to bite, some just to obey without blinking. They're testing behavior under stress. I felt sick. Why bury it? Because someone wanted it hidden long enough for it to be forgotten, or for someone else to find when the time was right. Dusty had found it. Echo barely left his side for the rest of the week. She seemed especially sensitive to loud sounds, hiding behind the couch when Mark dropped a pot or when thunder rolled in from the west. But when Dusty walked outside, she followed. One morning, she stood in front of the gate, barked once, then trotted toward the street. Dusty glanced back at me. You want us to follow? I asked. He barked. Once. We grabbed the leash, though it felt silly now. Dusty hadn't needed a leash in months, but we took it anyway. Mark drove while Tyler and I sat in the back, watching Dusty's ears twitch with every turn. Echo sat beside him, staring forward like she knew where we were going. They led us to an abandoned service station 10 miles out of town. Dusty jumped from the truck before we even came to a full stop. He circled the building twice, then sat by the side door. It looked locked. I tried the handle. It wasn't. We stepped into a long, dusty hallway lit only by the light slipping through cracks in the siding. And then we heard it. Whining. Soft. Faint. But steady. Dusty ran first. Behind a stack of overturned metal shelves was a plywood door. Dusty pawed it twice. We pushed it open. Inside were 3 crates. Each held a dog. One was barely moving. One sat perfectly still, staring at the wall. The third barked once when the door opened. Mark called Officer Lane while I crouched beside the crates. No food. No water. No bedding. Just metal and noise. Within an hour, the dogs were safe in the back of the animal control van. Dusty and Echo watched them leave, silent. Lane handed me a folded paper he found inside. Read this, he said. It was a list. Names, breeds, ages, status R or P. What's that mean? I asked. He pointed. Look at the bottom. R equals release. P equals placement. Placement where? We think it means auction. They're selling them. To private buyers. Anyone who can pay. I folded the list and put it in my coat pocket. When we got home, Dusty walked to the tree where the bin had been buried and lay down. He stayed there all night. 3 days later, another crate appeared at the far corner of our property. Not on our porch, not at the gate. Hidden. Inside was a black Labrador, shivering, muzzled. We named her Nova. She didn't make a sound for nearly 2 days. Then, one night, she walked to Dusty's bed, curled up next to him, and slept. That same week, Tyler wrote a letter to his school principal asking if he could start a volunteer club called Dusty's Crew. Kids could help rescue animals, he wrote. Not just dogs, any animal that needs someone to find it. The principal said yes. Dusty attended the first meeting. 12 kids showed up with notebooks and snacks. One of them asked if Dusty could be the club mascot. He's more than that, Tyler said. He's the reason it exists. Dusty sat in the middle of the room like he knew exactly what was happening. That night we got a message through the website. No name, no location. Just a photo of a dog, chained, in a warehouse. And a caption. See if your little golden hero can find this one. We showed it to Dusty. He stood, walked to the door, and we followed. Because whatever Dusty was chasing, wherever this trail ended, he wasn't going alone. And he wasn't stopping now. We left before sunrise. Dusty was already waiting by the truck, his leash hanging from Tyler's hand, not that we expected to use it. Echo sat at his side, alert but calm, and Nova paced the edge of the driveway like she could feel the tension in the air. This was different from every other trip we'd taken. The silence said so. Not a word spoken between us until we turned onto the main road, the photo printed from the email lying in Mark's lap. The dog in the picture was a tan mutt, a shepherd lab mix maybe, his ribs showing through mangy fur. He was chained to a pipe in what looked like an abandoned building. Concrete floor, high windows, rusted beams. It wasn't much to go on, but Dusty had stared at the image longer than any of us, then walked straight to the front door and waited. We trusted that. Lane had helped narrow the location. An old feed storage warehouse off Route 28 had matched the windows and layout. He didn't ask us not to go. He just asked us to call when we got there. The drive took 40 minutes. No one talked. When we pulled onto the gravel lot, Dusty whined and pawed at the door. The place looked abandoned. Rust ate away at the siding. Weeds climbed through the fence. A sliding bay door hung crooked, barely holding onto its track. Dusty jumped out before the truck stopped rolling. He ran to the door, sniffed twice, then barked. Short, sharp. Mark forced the lock. The door screeched as it rolled open just enough for us to slip through. Inside was darker than expected. The early light only reached a few feet in. Dusty led. No hesitation. Echo and Nova followed, tense but ready. We stepped over broken boards, empty pallets, and shattered glass until we found the hallway. Long, bare. Dusty slowed, nose to the floor, tail stiff. Then the barking started. Not Dusty's. Ahead of us, faint but rising, came the sound of a dog in distress. We ran. Dusty turned left, then right, then stopped outside a steel door. He scratched once, then again, then backed away. Mark reached for the handle. Locked. I stepped back. Move! Mark kicked it open with one solid blow. Inside, chained to the wall, was the dog from the picture. He wasn't alone. 4 crates lined the walls. 2 were empty. 2 weren't. One held a thin golden retriever, shaking. The other held a pit bull, eyes closed, breathing shallow. Dusty barked, once, loud, Then the sound of footsteps behind us. 3 men, dressed in dark jackets. 2 of them had flashlights. 1 had a bat. Dusty moved before they spoke. He didn't bite. He didn't growl. He walked between us and them, stood squarely, and stared. "You shouldn't be here," one of them said. Dusty growled now. I stepped forward. "Neither should you." The man with the bat took 1 step, but Mark raised his phone. "We've already sent your faces to the police. You lay a hand on us, and they'll find you before nightfall." The flashlight man turned and ran. The other 2 followed. We heard their car peel off as we opened the crates. The golden retriever licked Dusty's face. The pit bull didn't move. Mark carried him. We called Lane. He met us outside with 2 animal control trucks and 3 squad cars. "This is it," he said. "This is what we needed." The dogs were loaded, medical care dispatched, the facility tagged and recorded. Dusty stood by the truck, watching it all. Silent. That night we got home just after sunset. Dusty didn't go to his bed. He walked to the porch and lay down by the gate. The others joined him. Jasper, Pepper, Maple, Diesel, Nova, Echo. All silent, all still. They knew. Tyler brought out a blanket and sat beside Dusty. No one asked him to. I brought them water. Mark turned on the porch light, and we sat. For an hour. Then, too, no one spoke. Then Dusty stood, walked to the center of the yard, and barked once. Not a warning, not fear, a call. And in the distance, we heard more. 1 bark, then another, then dozens, all around the town, from neighborhoods and woods and corners we'd never seen. Dogs answered. Some far, some near, some we'd never met, some we never would. But they heard. Because Dusty had spoken. He had called them home.